Well, hello there.
Hey Andrew, how's everything been?
Good. How you doing, Brian?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's an interesting time right now with equities and gold kind of surging, but crypto kind of stuck in the mud right now, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting times. It's always interesting, isn't it? I mean, with the
Yeah,
markets, yeah, it's always interesting. Hey, so just want to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our audience who are tuning in right now. Just want to say welcome. Today is Thursday, the 13th of July, where I'm at, and I assume it's nighttime, Wednesday, the 12th of July, where you're at, Brian.
correct. Yep, 6:30, 12th of July still.
All right, fantastic. All right, so we're just gonna jump right into it because we've got some pretty exciting stuff to go through today. Litecoin halving is on the way, and that's something we'll look at today, probably, Brian. And yeah, look, if it's your first time tuning in, look, feel free to share, like, subscribe, follow us so that you can and tell your friends about us, tell your family and friends about us. So, what's happening, Brian? What's been going on?
Yeah, so we had the CPI data come out, and the inflation rates were much lower than expected, and this caused equities to really start to take off. Let me share my screen here so we can look at stuff.
Sure.
That's showing up okay?
Yep. Coming right up. There we go.
All right, so yeah, we can see that the overall social volume is up big time for Bitcoin. It's really been getting a lot of attention lately. Ethereum, on the other hand, kind of a decline. I think Litecoin should be right here. So even though it is now 3 weeks until the halving, we can see that the social volume is down 35% this week compared to the week before. Tether, on the other hand, is way up as people speculate if whales are injecting more stablecoins into Bitcoin sometime soon. And then you can see some of the highs and lows here. Solana having a great week, up 12%. Matic up 8%. Fantasy Gold is kind of this weird asset that's not really able to be traded, but its prices continue to just go crazy. And then Hex is rebounding a little bit, up 23%. So those are some of the notables. But as I mentioned, one of the big topics was the inflation uh, coming out today on the CPI report and stating that it rose by just 0.2%, which is great news because people were expecting around double that. And as soon as that report came out, we can see that equities, gold, and silver all rose quite clearly. You can see right here in teal, this is the S&P gold price. This is here in gold, and then Bitcoin and Ethereum are kind of just flat here in green and dark green. So we saw the obvious effect on crypto platforms, particularly on Reddit and Twitter, and a little bit on 4chan. But Reddit and Twitter really went nuts over the CPI report and had this huge spike and surge, but it didn't result in price action, at least not yet. But I still believe that these big surges could be good for the next week or so of crypto price action because people are very well aware. And sometimes, money goes into equities and then profits are taken out, and investors with big wallets do more speculative trading and put their profits into crypto. So that could still be beneficial. What do you think about that, Andy? I'm not able to hear you. I don't know if your audio is currently on.
Oh, sorry,
There we go.
I put myself on mute. Yeah. I think what's interesting about inflation is that inflation should come down eventually, and the Fed should hit their target 2% because of how inflation is calculated. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
say we're in July now, they calculate that against July last year, and then
Right.
they from there they'll know whether or not there's been an increase in inflation. Doesn't mean that prices will come down. It just means that eventually it'll flatten out. You're still paying high price, inflated prices, but then inflation technically has come down, and
Right.
when they hit that 2%, I guess that's when markets begin to soar again, right? Possibly.
Exactly. Yeah, we kind of expect that if inflation is easing, which it kind of has already been showing signs of, especially since March when we had that big price explosion, uh, that's going to ultimately be what allows crypto to soar once again. So anytime we get good news, we're going to get a little bit of overexcitement like we're seeing now. Things will probably calm down. I don't expect that, equities are going to immediately reverse. What I do think is maybe they'll flatten out for the remainder of the week, while crypto may have some slight gains. We'll see if it's an immediate reaction or it takes a week or two.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But it certainly is interesting times right now.
Absolutely. So I'll look at a few other crypto metrics here on the Bitcoin side, and then we'll, do the last 10 minutes or so on Litecoin and see what's going on there. But on the
Yes.
transaction volume side, not much going on, staying pretty low at the moment. Daily active addresses, we have seen a little bit of picking up after it. Oh, actually, you know what? Hold that thought. It looks like data has been delayed. Yeah. So again, transaction volume low, daily active addresses, and circulation about flat. So utility hasn't really changed much. I am still concerned about the fact that the long-term trading returns are very high at about plus 25%. Short-term wise, it's at about plus 4%. Either way, with them being above 0% here, that means that it is more risky than average to be in the asset or adding on to that asset.
Hey, Brian,
Yeah.
I know we do this almost every episode, but for the newcomers to the channel, maybe let's go through what MVRV is again, and kind
Of
of
course.
just to educate the newcomers to the channel.
Yeah, so MVRV measures the realized profits and losses versus the market cap, and the average trading returns are dictated by the time frame that we choose here. 30 days means that it's active traders that have been moving assets in the past 30 days, 365 days, same explanation. So we use one short-term line and one long-term line to kind of get a grasp of what the average trading returns are looking like, where it's a zero-sum game, as some don't realize in crypto. You want to see average trading returns actually in the negatives to signify that you're in a good optimal spot to add on or invest in an asset. So when they're higher than average, that means that traders are already in good profit, which makes sense. You saw this huge spike almost a month ago from the ETF celebrations that were going on. This was shortly after our last call. So because of all those ETFs being announced, prices really went nuts. We saw prices get up to close to a little above 31K actually. And then they've kind of been ranging in this 30K to 31.3K range ever since. So since that time, MVRVs are starting to come down just a little, but we would still be looking for something more like down here in the negative range. And we can look at the past year for those ideal times. So, like, for example, after the FTX collapse, everything went down. You see average trading returns, long-term wise, we're down at negative 46%. This would be a symbol that it's the optimal time to buy based on history, especially because the 30-day MVRV was also very low. So when you see both the red and yellow lines well below the zero axis, that's a great time. Meanwhile, this MVRV Z score is kind of a measurement of all time frames together. And when you see that getting up high like it is now, that means the short, mid, and long-term traders are all kind of in this profitability state, and it's a bit dangerous right now in crypto. So that's kind of the summary of MVRV.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brian. I'm sure the audience would really appreciate understanding
Yeah, totally.
that
Um,
metric. Yeah.
Besides that, we can see funding rates are pretty normal at the moment. Not much change in terms of big longs or big shorts that can alter prices. Whale transactions, pretty neutral. I'll come back to the whale tiers in just a moment. We did see a little bit of dormant activity here, where the mean dollar invested age line started to flatten out. And what this measures is the average age in which each token is sitting in that same respective address. When it's constantly going up, that's a bit of a bearish sign. When it starts to flatten out, that's more of a bullish sign. And ideally, we like to see something like, this back in 2021, where the average age is actually going down, indicating that stagnant coins are beginning to be moved into new addresses. That's a sign that circulation is starting to pick up and the network is getting active, which ultimately leads to price surges and bull markets. It's also worth noting that the supply in exchanges is getting historically low too. You can see it's down here at 6.07% of Bitcoin on exchanges. That's the lowest point since December 2017. So, in terms of risks of future sell offs, only 6% of the supply is available to be sold off on exchanges. And that's a good sign as well. You can also see that social dominance, I'll take out volume here for a moment, but social dominance is starting to pick up again with a lot of discussion related to Bitcoin instead of other altcoins and assets that maybe don't mean as much to the overall ecosystem in crypto. So, with about a third of discussions related to Bitcoin right now, that's a sign that we are in a uh, spot of health where there's actually a lot of discussion related to the asset that means the most to the overall crypto markets. And it's also a sign that there's some fear instead of greed. When Bitcoin is not talked about a lot, that typically is because they're talking about Pepe and Doge and whatever other assets are out there. Regardless of your viewpoints, those assets are not Bitcoin, and therefore can have um, a bit of a greed effect when they're being discussed often. And yeah, that's about it. As promised, let me look at the whale tiers really quick so we can see what's going on there. Let's see if I can hit the right one this time. So we've got a lot of different lines here. The most important is this one, the Bitcoin line that shows addresses holding anywhere between 10 to 10,000 BTC and what their percentage of the overall supply is. Right now, they're holding a little over 67%. And you can see they were really dropping rapidly about 2 weeks before the all time high back in November 2021. They started to go down, down, down. And then finally, in April, about 3 months ago, we started to see a pretty convincing sign that it's climbing again. And this is accumulation that is key to Bitcoin's prices beginning to rise and even exceed the all time high that we saw almost 2 years ago now. We can also see that Tether was getting accumulated rapidly. It was kind of exchanged for Bitcoin when the ETF announcements were made last month. USD Coin is about even. DAI and Paxos Standard are being accumulated. So there is a little extra buying power coming back into the market. I'd still like to see that some of that buying power is coming into Tether specifically. That would be a great sign. Yeah, and besides that, before we get into Litecoin, Andy, I'd love to hear your perspective a little on, what's being said on the equities side and some of your community's insights and thoughts right now.
Yeah, look, I think, I mean, over here in Malaysia, for yeah, just to share a bit of a local perspective, the interest in local equities have been extremely low. A lot of them, a lot of the investors actually got in during the pandemic in 2020 and 2011, and I guess this was probably a world phenomenon where all markets around the world were pretty much rallying, and a lot of them were new investors who had never invested before, and they were stuck at home, and they kind of just jumped into into the wonderful world of investing, and they didn't really know what they were doing. It's like giving a loaded gun to a 5-year-old, and yeah, expecting them to know what to do with it. And
Yeah.
so a lot of them got burned. A lot of them are still licking their wounds. Um, but from an investor's perspective, there's actually a lot of very good picks, or shall I say, a lot of uh, discounted, good quality stocks that are actually out there. I mean, you've got companies, that are making money. Like we just did a search yesterday, right? We did a bit of an exercise where we were looking for companies that had 10 years of profit continuous even through the pandemic, where they were profitable, they were cash flow positive, and they paid out dividends. I think we found about 20% of all the stocks listed in Malaysia fitting that category. So that was pretty surprising. I mean, it was quite
Wow.
surprising to us, and these are selling for cents on the dollar. So I look. This is obviously not financial advice, but if you look hard enough, you will find some bargains out there. So the same applies to stocks as it does to crypto, right? It's the same. Obviously, there are different metrics that we look at, but there are always opportunities if you look hard enough.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's funny you say there are a lot of bargains out there. I mean, just looking at our MVRV model, which kind of lends to the metric we just looked at for Bitcoin, anything that is showing here in light green showing semi underbought or bright green showing underbought, that means that it's considered to be undervalued based on the fact that average traders are at a big deficit in their returns on them right now. So you can see, for example, Binance Coin, big underbought signal at the moment. Gitcoin, League of Kingdoms, Dodo, ApeCoin, just to name a few that are showing extreme underbought signals at the moment. So these are the kinds of assets that you can be looking at. You want to buy when blood is in the streets, as Warren Buffett
Yeah.
always says, and crypto is
Yeah.
no different.
Yeah. I mean, it really is the psychological behavior of humans, aren't we? I mean, nobody wants to rush into a burning building, right? Because we're all afraid.
Absolutely
But
right.
as Warren Buffett always says, be greedy when others are fearful, and be
Yep.
fearful when others are greedy.
And right now, people are certainly fearful, and
Oh yeah.
that's a promising sign. It doesn't mean we're going to kind of break out of this resistance level of 31.3K on Bitcoin anytime soon, but it does increase the probability of that happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why don't we spend the last few minutes looking at Litecoin a little bit? So Andy,
Sounds
I know
great.
you're maybe following Litecoin even a little bit more closely than I am, but I believe it's August 2nd, which or 3rd, depending on your time zone, which is
Yeah.
when the halving is supposed to commence.
Hmm.
Yeah. And as far as the halving goes, I mean, I believe both of our understanding of its definition is about half of this, not half the supply goes away. Sometimes people falsely think that that's what a halving is. What it means is that the uh, difficulty in mining is doubled and it's half as profitable. Therefore, the rate of new supply coming out is shortened and slowed, making each existing coin that much more valuable because there is less implied future coins coming into the mix. Is that about how you understand it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, absolutely. I guess the reward, or the flow, or as you'd say, the amount of additional newly minted or newly created Litecoins um, are are halved come time of halving. So if I mean, just to oversimplify, I mean, if we used to get 1,000 Litecoin every year, now you'd only get 500 Litecoin every year. So the supply has been reduced,
Right.
and hence the perceived value is that it should effectively go up in terms of value because the amount has halved. But obviously, I guess historically that hasn't been so. But maybe I'd like to add to the newer audiences, to the newer audience that a lot of you probably may have heard of Litecoin, but you're not too sure what it is. It's basically the second oldest coin right now in the top 10, top 20, and it's basically very similar to what Bitcoin is or how Bitcoin works. The only differences are that it has, 4 times the amount of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's got 21 million, and Litecoin will have a maximum supply of 84 million. It processes the blocks 4 times faster. So it is every 2.5 minutes where a new block is created versus 10 minutes versus every 10 minutes. It pretty much mimics or has a lot of the same features that that Bitcoin has. And it's seen, or it was marketed back in 2017 as the silver to Bitcoin's gold. Yeah. So that's just a very high level quick overview.
Yeah. And Litecoin is the second oldest asset out there. Some people think it's Ethereum, but Litecoin's been around, I believe, since 2010 or even 09.
2011, I think it was.
11. Thank you.
2011, yeah.
But either way, it came second after Bitcoin, and they both are. It's essentially known as the Lightning Network King, which Bitcoin was too at one point. So it's kind of using the initial framework that Bitcoin was, and it has some lasting power. It's currently the 10th ranked market cap asset. It's often not talked about nearly as much as the other 9 in the top 10, but its consistency has surprised many people, and when a halving comes around, people tend to be much more focused on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So just skimming through, I know we just have a couple minutes left, but trading volume, we saw this huge spike along with many assets right at the end of June when we suddenly saw this huge surge. This was kind of isolated. It didn't happen at the same time as Bitcoin, which was more so around like the 17th to the 25th. So Litecoin had kind of this second leg up where it got all the way up to about 113 or so before falling. And we had this weird transaction volume anomaly at the beginning of June, and that actually signaled a top. So from what we see, trading volume when price is going up is a good thing, but watch out for these big anomalous spikes in on-chain volume. Those can often indicate that a downturn is about to happen. And then similarly on the utility side, we look at daily active addresses, and we can see that we kind of had a big surge here when it was at its bottom in mid-May. And then it's just kind of gradually declined. But circulation, from what I've seen, is a good bullish signal. You can see this spike here, even this spike here, all are happening right before a big price rise. This one was a huge one right at the bottom. Big price rise coming right after this, more price rising. And of course, this is the most obvious one. We had about a day notice of this big circulation spike on the 29th before one day later, if I just highlight the little 2-day window here, price went up 31% in those 2 days, and then 62% in 4 days.
That's insane, isn't it?
Yeah. So it looks like circulation is a really good alpha metric that you Litecoin lovers can focus on as we get into the final, 20-ish days or so before the halving happens. And like Bitcoin, we do see that the average trading returns are a bit overinflated right now. Both the long-term and short-term are quite high. So that's something to be a little worried about. We might need to see some sort of cool down to get people to FUD out of LTC, and then there would likely be a big rebound that could even surpass 113 near the halving. Only real longs happening on the funding rate side, so no one's shorting and expecting prices to go down. When you do see shorts happen, that tends to just give prices rocket fuel so they can rise faster. Whale transactions have been really weird. I wouldn't be surprised if this is, bots or founders' addresses doing some funky stuff on an automated time frame, because we see, these huge spikes like we've been seeing since mid-May, but then almost nothing for a long stretch. So I can't really analyze that much other than to say it's very bizarre. And then looking at whales really quick. So with Litecoin valued around $100, give or take, we can look at whales starting at about 10K to 100K, 100K to a million, and a million to 10 million coins held. And they're all fairly flat here in July. We have seen some accumulation on the 10K to 100K. These are more like sharks, but the red and yellow, which are definitely whale addresses, they've been very flat and consistent lately. So maybe that's worth checking in these final few weeks before the halving, because there could easily be some sort of big spike once again. You can see a lot of dormant coin movement too, as I talked about with Bitcoin. When these lines go down, that's a good sign that the asset is about to rise, like it did here and even here. So that's a good thing. Not much realized profit or loss happening. It's fairly flat. Dominance, you can see it's starting to rise a little bit. So it had its big spike here. This was when it was kind of going off and decoupled from the rest of crypto. But, you can see the long-term trend here as we get closer and closer to the halving. The crowd is definitely becoming more and more aware that we're getting close, even without these big anomaly spikes here. So I like the look of that as well. I think more social dominance for Litecoin is good and will ultimately create more volume as we get closer to the date. And that's about it. Development activity isn't really much of a thing for LTC, so that can mostly be ignored. But yeah, overall, I think Litecoin's in a good spot, and I personally think that there is a good argument that it can recover back to what it was seeing just 10 days ago, and potentially even go past it.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that, Brian. I guess the other thing that's very often overlooked about Litecoin is the fact that it's also one of the most available coin on exchanges around the world.
True.
Just because it's one of the oldest, right? So really the three, right? Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, these three are pretty much almost available on every platform or every exchange out there.
Very true.
So that's good for if you value liquidity, if you value the ability to transact on different exchanges. So and a lot of people sometimes prefer to transfer Litecoin instead of Bitcoin because it gets there that little bit faster. It has the same security model, and they don't want to use the Lightning Network because they want on-chain transactions to happen. So it's got a little niche there, Litecoin. It's right there between using Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. It's got that niche right there in the middle. If you want to transact, but you want it to be on-chain, you want it to be secure, you want it to get there on time. Well, a little bit fast. Well, 4 times faster than Bitcoin on chain. Then Litecoin's kind of that niche for you. So really, I think a lot of new people coming into crypto don't really understand the nuances or the different use cases, I guess, for the different coins.
I think that's really well said. Well said. It's it's kind of an alternative option, just like a lot of people focus on with Ethereum compared to Bitcoin. So it's good to have more options. It pushes the envelope and makes all assets work that much harder to end
Yep.
up climbing the mountain and being the king of crypto one day.
Yeah. Well, options are always good for users like us, right? So it's always good to have options. Yeah, it's always good for
Totally.
the consumer. Yeah. Hey, Brian, once again, thank you so much for your time, for jumping on this month. Really appreciate you giving us your time. Look, it's been a great session. Looking forward to our next session.
Yeah. Thanks as always, Andy. Love being here with you and chatting markets. And cheers to you and your great community.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Have a good one.
Likewise. Bye, guys. Take care.
Bye, guys.